Well, our genealogical series continues tonight with a look at challenges facing Black Americans who are trying to trace their roots beyond 1870. The hurdles can be rightly America's birth defect known as slavery. We're also going to talk about getting beyond the paper trail.
The organization was founded in 1977.
Carolyn Rowe is with the Prince George's chapter of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society.
We present programs throughout the county to community organizations, churches, civic groups, you name it, family reunions.
Tonight, on the third and final segment of our series, we are going to look at Black genealogy and the hurdles researchers face.
The main roadblock is of course, slavery for most of us, but not all of us.
The first time the names of blacks were listed on census records, unless they were free, was 1870. George and Della Hargrove were my second great-grandparents. Prior to 1870, slaves were denied the basic dignity of a name on a census record. This is an 1850 slave schedule. Note James Hargrove of Edgecombe County, North Carolina. He owned 19 slaves. Human property reduced to a hash mark, age, and gender. So where does one go when the trail ends? Rose says if you know where your ancestors came from, look for a slave owner in that area. My great-grandmother, Nettie Harrison, was a slave from Alabama.
I would look for a white family in Alabama with that surname. If I know the city and town that she lived in Alabama and the county, I would look for white people with that name. I would get a history book on the county to see who were the first inhabitants.
Rowe also researched what's known as cohabitation records. You can find them in courthouses and state archives.
1866, there was a law, an act of the General Assembly in North Carolina in March of 1866 that mandated persons who had been cohabitating together should come before a justice of the peace and declare themselves as husband and wife.
That was how she located her fourth great-grandparents, Thomas and Polly Fry.
My fourth great-grandparents came forward in 1866 and said they had been living together since 1816. They had belonged to a Nicholas Fry. They had been with him, thank God, for 50 years as husband and wife, which is most unusual because so often the slaves were sold away from each other.
When the paper trail ends, you can turn to science, more specifically DNA analysis. It can tell you where your ancestors came from. One of Rose's relatives had theirs tested.
Primarily black. I forgot the percentage. It's like 90-some% black, sub-Saharan African, a smidgen of European.
I also had my DNA tested. The results were complex and a bit surprising. I'm 65% African, mostly Nigerian, but also with DNA prevalent in Ivory Coast and Ghana, which means I have distant relatives from that region. I'm also 32% European, with distant relatives from the United Kingdom, Ireland, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, and Finland. The rest is 2% Native American and 1% Pacific Islander. Well, it sounds like it takes a lot of work.
It does. It takes a lot of time. It's really not as fast as it looks on TV, unless you got a full staff of complementary people to do it. But if you're doing it on your own, it's going to take some time.
If you would like more on how to find more information, you can contact the Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society at aahgs.org.